All right, what do you say, Alan? Should we go ahead and kick it off?
I think so.
All right, awesome. Well, welcome everybody to the Salesforce and Bolt Data webinar. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about implementation success. Let me go ahead and introduce myself and introduce you to our panelist. My name is Christina Rampone. I'm the Director of Partner Sales here at Salesforce within our CBS operating unit. I've been with Salesforce for 5 years, and I'm going to be moderating the panel. Something near and dear to my heart is making sure we've got an implementation success plan set up early when we are talking about, what it's going to take to make this successful early on, actually in the deal cycle. So that is my role. And then I also see what happens on the implementation side, working alongside our partners that are our strategic advisors helping our customers. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over first to Alan to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Alan Alexopoulos. I'm the Managing Director here at Bolt Data. I've got a background in project management and large-scale program governance. Looking forward to speaking with you guys today.
And we have an amazing customer with us today who's going to help to share his story as well and offer some lessons learned and insights along the way. Alex, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Alex Lane. I'm the AVP of Global Field Operations at a company called BusPatrol. We're a bus safety company, and I oversee all of the field operations, supervising the installation and maintenance of over 15,000 buses, as well as the project management component for our programs.
Fantastic. And last but certainly not least, my partner in crime here at Salesforce, Bonnie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. I'm Bonnie Broyle. I run our customer success team here for our consumer and business services operating unit. I've been with Salesforce about 6 years, but before that, I was a Salesforce client for over 12 and have spent the last better part of 25 years doing CRM implementations or advising clients on CRM implementations. So looking forward to talking with everyone today.
Fantastic. Let's move into today's agenda. So you're in the right place. We are talking today about implementation success. Included in that are all of the things, right? Allocation. What's the level of effort, lift from my team required, change management, and all those important topics. And so Alan, why don't you tell us a little bit about Bolt Data as we kind of kick off this conversation as a Salesforce implementation partner.
Yes, thanks, Christina. Yes, Bolt Data, we've been doing Salesforce implementations for over 10 years now. We have a team of people that are specialists in sales and service. And we've also launched recently a product that sits on the Salesforce platform for doing IoT and connected field service. So we're really happy to be here and talking with Alex, Christina, and Bonnie about best practices for your successful implementation.
Great. Thank you for that. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we do today is make sure that we're focusing in and tailoring this discussion for the audience on the line. So what I'd love to do is post a quick poll so we can understand what you guys would love to learn about today, what you're hoping to walk away having been the most informed on as we come out of the session. If we can all, we'll leave this up for a few seconds. If you can all submit an answer, that would be very great. All right, we're going to wrap up the poll as everyone submitted their answers. And then Alex, you can show us what the results are. Awesome. Project governance, good, the bad, we want to know all of the things. So that's great. Well aligned with what we were planning to discuss. And also what skills and are needed from your internal teams, as well as what are some of the risks, right? And how to manage those risks, which I think go right along with project governance. So that's great. We'll go ahead and close the poll. So right along those lines, right, and what everyone's interested in talking about, I want to turn it over to Bonnie to kind of set us up around maybe the three main keys to successful partner implementations as we view it here at Salesforce.
Thanks, Christina. So yeah, before we jump in and really talk about what an implementation looks like, I want to share what I've seen our most successful customers do and the way to go into these projects with the right mind frame. So first is really think about this as you own the project. So that ownership mentality, you are hiring a partner, doing it with a partner, but it's a true partnership. You're not outsourcing it. You're not, setting it and forgetting it. You really own the project. And the partner is there to help and support you along the way. So if you go into it thinking that you're going to be able to just outsource it to them, and then when they're done, it's all going to magically happen, that's not a great way to go into it. So you really own this project. The second is learn Salesforce. Really be able to speak the same language as the partner. That way you can get knowledge transfer as you go, as opposed to those more of an outsourcing model where the partner does everything and then at the end you do a 1 or 2 day knowledge transfer. Never see that go well. It works much better if you invest the time in learning Salesforce and doing knowledge transfer as you go and are really involved in it. And then also really think about, what does life look like after the first implementation, after the partner's SOW is done? How self-sufficient do we want to be as a client? And start working towards that from the beginning. Don't get to the end of the project and then start thinking about, how are we supporting this platform going forward? If you really think about that from the beginning, you'll be a lot better off. So definitely invest in learning Salesforce. And then to support you in doing that, use the success resources that come as part of your premier success plan or your signature success plan. We have a ton of resources to help you learn Salesforce, but also do expert coaching. So take advantage of our expert coaching. We have hundreds of webinars, videos, one-on-one sessions. Every video or webinar you take, you can request a one-on-one with a specialist. Use that. Don't leave just your partner to assume that they're going to train you as you go. Really use the success resources from Salesforce. Jump on the Ask an Expert office hour sessions we have running daily. We have hundreds of them every month. Learn how to really get advice from Salesforce, and then also from the Trailblazer community. So Salesforce has a huge ecosystem. The Trailblazer community is where you can go to ask questions from clients and partners who are doing exactly what you have just done. So really, if you invest the time in learning Salesforce and learning about the resources that are already there, and you take ownership of the project and don't treat it as, set it and forget it, you'll be off to a really good start.
This is, thank you, Bonnie. And maybe just to add, and this is from the alliances side of the org, but I don't know if everybody on the line might realize that, at Salesforce, we go to market through our partners. More than 90% of our customers have relied on a partner at one time or another, or whether it be an SI or an ISV, right, to help make them successful. So it's really great as you talk about success resources that we do have within Salesforce, how our partners and customer success work together for the greater good. So that's awesome, very helpful. We can go on and there we go. We can do a little bit more of a deep dive around this topic. How do I, as a leader, ensure my organization is ready? That's what we want to talk about here. So, Alan, maybe
I'll tell you, this Bonnie's, slide set this up perfectly, right? You guys want to hear about sort of governance, good and bad, and sort of skills are two themes here. So, we worked with BusPatrol and Alex on a project that probably took in total 6 months, but really BusPatrol did an especially good job at governance and really tightly controlling the scope with clear success metrics and very, very strong, sponsorship. Alex, can you talk a little bit about sort of how you approach that and what you think made this successful at BusPatrol.
Yeah, sure. So before we started to even find a partner for this, we defined really what we were looking for. What was the system we needed? And we created even just a matrix of needs, essentially, with must-haves, nice-to-haves, and then just icing on the cake kind of things. And then when we partnered with Salesforce and with Bolt, we went through that in detail. And then I really talked through, like, okay, this is how Salesforce can deliver this task and this feature, so that we had an understanding of what we could be expecting, and we were all on the same page as we were entering into the design of the product. And then the other thing we did was work with the Bolt resources, Salesforce resources, to show them how we did business, right? We brought them to our academy, actually made them watch us put equipment on buses, showed them the systems we were using, talked through the pain points that we went through, and really, got on the same page as far as what we needed to have an outcome. And then through the entire process, we met regularly. We talked about, okay, where are we for the MVP release? Where are we for planning for next sprint? How are we on hours, right? How many hours do we have left for this sprint? Can we do some trade-offs here and there? And it allowed us to really stay on target to goal and, launch on time. So,
And I'd like to add that, Alex was really, really good at staying engaged all the way through the process. So if you want to know about a governance bad situation, sometimes leaders come in, they are active sponsors, they sign the checks, they make sure that things are get going well, and then their sort of the interest ties off. They got other priorities, right? Alex was there all the way through the process. He did a fantastic job of managing his team's expectations, even as new things came up. Alex, why don't you talk a little bit about sort of the shields that you had to put up for managing everybody coming out of the woodwork and talking about their favorite feature that they needed?
Yeah. So one of the reasons we stayed so engaged is because this was going to be our system. We were going to own it from the start to the end. And if it didn't deliver on time, it's on us, right? So there were no excuses to say, well, it was another team that implemented it incorrectly. No, we set the standards. And so, as a result, we brought in key players that would be engaged and report on statuses because they had to own it, really.
That's great. Bonnie, what, you've seen hundreds of projects. What, any other examples of either good or bad governance or ownership that you've seen?
Yeah, I love what Alex just said, because I always think about governance is really the way to keep an eye on the prize. Why did you decide to invest in Salesforce? Tie everything you do back to that. If you can't tie it back to that, really question yourself why you're doing it. He also mentioned the MVP, the minimum viable product, as a phase one. I always like to say phase one is getting you onto the platform. Get you onto the platform that you can then innovate from there. If you try to get every benefit out of that you expect to get out of Salesforce in that minimum viable product, you will never go live. So I think being really disciplined about what do we need to do let's just get on the platform. And then once you're on the platform, then you can innovate so much more quickly. So that's
Yeah.
I'm going to add on that real quick is, after you do enough projects, you realize, you're never going to get everything you want in the first iteration. So when we went into this product, we said, okay, we have reserved a certain number of hours at the end of the project because I know something's going to come up, right? We know there's going to be customizations because somebody needs to interpret something differently. So we stayed really strict on using hours up front because we knew we're going to have to bring things forward to just tweak things differently. And I suggest that for really any project. Don't try to plan out every hour you have.
And in terms of project and where you spend your hard-earned dollars on implementations, Alex is 100% right that get it in, get some experience with it. In our experience, sometimes things that people think they need up front, they find later on that it was not a good investment, that they find that their priorities have shifted once they get experience with that MVP system. And so they make better and different decisions about what to add on later on. So when you look at your overall cost of ownership and where you invested your dollars, much more efficient and impactful.
I mean, in our example, we had this, one of our, even it was must-haves was around vendor integration and using tools to help us manage our own vendors. But as we engaged in this project, we started realizing that's not even a model we wanted to use. We didn't want to use vendors anymore because our own staff were still performing so well. So we were able to repurpose those end of the bucket hours for inventory management, which as a result has had a huge financial benefit for us. And we weren't even really planning on that to start. So
That's an excellent outcome, Alex.
Mhm.
I would say that we have a what we call red accounts here at Salesforce as part of our CSG organization. When an implementation goes a little bit south or a customer's unhappy with where we are, we escalate them and we call that a red account internally. And I think that, is a huge percentage of what we see in that process is always around governance. So I would just encourage you all, to take heed of the information that we're sharing with you, but moreover, make sure that you're using the Q&A. Feel free to enter any questions because we are going to get to all of them at the end. So if something pops into your mind, and this is a hot topic, so you can go ahead and ask them at any time. Okay, so we can probably move on. You teed us up pretty well here, Alex. We want to talk about, what a great implementation strategy really does look like. We want to set up a good process. There are these basic elements, right? Plan, architect, construct, validate, deploy. I think we all know what the basic elements are, but Salesforce's implementations are very agile and they're very iterative. There's going to be milestones and checkpoints along the way. So we want to kind of go through what a good example is, because as you're going through the process of maybe evaluating your partners or maybe just kicking off the project, this is going to be really impactful to the organization to understand what to expect as you proceed to the next steps. So, Alan, maybe you could dive into some greater detail around this.
Yeah. And just on the next slide, we dive into a little bit more detail on this. I think the key points for you all to take away, if we can move to the next slide, is that confirmation checkpoints along the way, right? So up front, we work with you, we look at your current processes, as Alex said, we do discovery, what's working, what's not working, and then we start to build but before we get too far, we need to do a checkpoint. And these checkpoints, you might say, well, okay, right, we all agree. Well, it's a different thing when you put it in writing and document what it is exactly that came out of this last session of discovery, and ask everybody to sort of sign up. And the reason that is important is it's as you move to the next phase, which is this iterative building process, oftentimes things will pop up in that process. Oh, I forgot to tell you about this, right? And those things can be very disruptive at the overall planning because we are all being held accountable for the timeline, the project timeline, and the scope. And if we haven't done a good job of identifying those requirements up front and getting everybody to sign off on them, it becomes just very fuzzy about what's in, what's out, and then the build phase is less focused and less impactful in terms of delivering against those requirements. And it's amazing what happens when you ask somebody to approve something. All of a sudden, their attention is there and they're very focused on making sure that it's correct. Alex, what did you, in this area, in sort of these checkpoint confirmations between design, build, and acceptance, what did you find that the experience was like with your project?
Yeah, it was really a great experience because especially Alan's team, they were really engaged with us. So, we were building towards the MVP and we had our requirements we were trying to hit. And then as we were building through it, and we had people from my team that were so engaged in the product, they were using the product, testing it at like an alpha stage, even finding, hey, oh, I forgot about this. And then when those would come up, we had a regularly scheduled prioritization meeting internally to say, okay, hey, Bob forgot about this feature, so this is going to cost us 5 hours. How does this stack up against the other feature we wanted to have launched? And then we internally decided, okay, this is our rank order we wanted to deliver. And then we would go back to Alan's team. They would review and we would lock it in, have an approval process, and then move forward. And by doing that, everyone was able to stay on the same page. The other thing we did is, and we'll talk about this a little later, is we would have points where we bring in the whole team, my whole internal team, all the key stakeholders, and say, hey guys, this is the decision we're making. This is how it's going to impact you in the tool. Everybody good? Yes? Okay. And then we go back to Bolt and work with them.
Excellent. So moving on, we get a question, how much time is required from your team? I think Alex gave a great example of bringing his whole team together. We often see the dynamic where, everybody's got their day job and then they've got this project, right? So it can be challenging to support the needs of this project if it is not from the top down identified as a strong priority. And given Alex's leadership, the entire team knew that it was important to Alex, and therefore they showed up, they were engaged, and they put in the time to do it. It wasn't that it wasn't a challenge, because it almost always is. But you should expect early on in the project during this discovery and design phase to spend upwards of 40% of your key stakeholders or subject matter experts' time to make sure that we get that right. Our work and our design is only as good as the information that you provide and our ability to follow up on that and really shake the requirements and make sure that we've got them all. And then as we move through the project, right, we are off building, coming back to you and looking for that feedback. Did we get it all? What did we miss? Did we design something that wasn't quite, that you expected? And then we iterate on that till we get that stuff right. And then the validation phase is, when we talk about, governance bad, this is an area that, especially for let's call it less mature organizations who don't have experience testing software. It's not something that we often do. And so we really work hard to nurture you, provide you the tools to do it. But, Bonnie talked about ownership up front. This is when we see if you are owning this thing or not, because if you take testing seriously, if you've written the test scripts and you've executed those well, you almost always find something, which is fine. That's why you test. But when we see bad governance, it's because people did not take the testing seriously. And most project delays occur during this phase when they get there and say, this is not what I expected. Well, why? Perhaps you weren't paying attention during the iteration reviews. Maybe you were, multitasking and just sort of watching the demo going by and not giving great feedback. And that is an example of where we really see when ownership has not, really been accepted and driven within the organization. Alex or Bonnie, other anecdotes on that, either good or bad?
Go ahead, Bonnie. You go first.
Okay, so I'll say if there's one thing you take away from this, and I always use the analogy of it, is that Salesforce is like a gym membership. You get out of it what you put into it, right? So paying for it's not enough. So really, making sure you're putting in the effort, that's going to determine how much you get out of it. And you can get amazing results out of Salesforce. That's why I'm here, right? I spent 20 plus years in IT managing all kinds of systems and fell in love with Salesforce because of how quickly you could deliver business changing technology to people to really help the business. And it's really, you take the time to learn it and you put in the effort and sky's the limit.
Yeah, one of the things that we did right off the bat, and I mentioned this earlier around ownership. I brought in my the VP that would be owning this tool going forward, and I said, okay, you're running this project. It's going to be your tool, and you're going to be responsible for moving this forward and keeping everyone informed. Additionally, we brought in somebody right off the bat, said, you're going to be the Salesforce admin going forward. So start learning the tools, partnering up with Alan's team, learning as much as you can from Tyler. And by doing that, it allowed us to, move forwards, keep everyone in line, and then also learn. So when the Volt team said, hey, this is how this tool works, we had people on the call that are like, oh yeah, that clicks. I understand from a technical aspect how that works. And then they could make suggestions back. Well, if it works this way, can we do this? And it really minimized a lot of the time needed to make changes on the fly. I would also, I recommend using the Trailblazer community, learning as much from the tools, the free tools. In many cases, there's a lot of resources out there. I mean, Paul has just really just become amazing at Salesforce in the year that we've been using it now, just because of that. So much that he's actually training 2 other people to use the tool and dispatch work, and they're both very excited about using this and adding this to their resume, right? Because it's a great skill to have. So it was not their full daytime job, but they were able to do this on the side without impacting too much of their regular scheduled work, and as a result, we had a successful launch.
I love what you said there, Alex, because when I am in a sales cycle and when I'm talking to customers, a lot of the time I'm hearing, how many folks on my team do I have to allocate to the project? Can I appoint someone on the team? How many different roles do I need? And Alan, you talked a lot to the level of effort there. But it's a tough ecosystem to hire in right now, right? We do have a couple of staffing partners and folks that we can recommend to our customers. Your Salesforce AE should be able to do that. But you should be able to, there's likely someone within your org that can own some of these roles. And depending on the size and breadth and scale of your project, or how many things we're implementing at once, right? Will determine, how many people and how many roles they need to be allocated to. So it's a question we get a lot, but it's also a fairly open-ended one. Anything to add there, Alex or Bonnie?
Go
ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it goes back to that idea of thinking about how self-sufficient you want to be after you're done working with your partner, or if you're ever done working with your partner, right? We have clients that keep partners on forever, and we have other folks that after the initial implementation are completely self-sufficient and want to do it themselves. So thinking that through and having an idea of what you want that to look like for you going in will help answer how many people do I need.
Alex, when you were training, I'm going to stay here for just a moment. When you were training your folks internally to take on this role, I believe you said his name was Paul. Did you start to get into the trailhead trainings and things before kickoff to ensure you all were speaking the same language as your partner throughout?
Yeah, as soon as we had access, I think all of us dived in and started trying to learn just how it works, what we could expect, and to get on the same page, to speak the same language, because it really helps when you are trying to diagnose problems. And then the other thing is we tried to share as many visuals of the tool with the stakeholders as well. So they would, when they saw the tool, it wouldn't be a surprise to them. One thing I wanted to mention just on the UAT test scripts, been doing this a while. I always find that in the initial planning, if we know we're going to have to do testing, so what we did is we actually informed the people who were going to do testing, hey, in X months, you're going to be doing testing. It's your responsibility. You're going to have to find these things. So start planning time in your schedule now and adjusting the workload, because that's going to be a responsibility. Because I cannot tell you how many projects I've implemented where it gets down to the tester and they're like, I don't have time for this. I'm too busy. Well, let's do it right. Right. And so by doing it right, it prevents hiccups later.
And, Alex and Alan, it sounds like BusPatrol did a really good job setting these expectations and responsibilities, aligning the responsibilities internally. But if you had to select, something that you could have done better, reflecting back, what would that be?
So there's two things that really come up. One is planning for business as usual, right? So Salesforce is a ever evolving tool. Sometimes they come out with new features, new requirements, changes to how they operate. You need to factor that in sometimes, and that may take some work. And I think there was the MFA launch in the middle of our launch, so it took us adjusting how we did some things. So I would have designed that a little differently, but that's just that happens for any product anywhere. And then the other one, which is really a larger issue that we had to face with, is cleaning up your data initially and early and often, I say, because once people have access to the tool, they're going to start entering information in it, and if you don't have governance around how they enter that, it could quickly become a mess. And that's one thing Doug jumped on right away. Instead of like allowing free text in some fields, we locked it down to options, right? Because when they started putting in free text or having the ability to select whatever they wanted, it created dirty data and dirty in, dirty out, right? So we didn't focus on that nearly as much as we wanted initially. Now we're in a situation where we've resolved it mostly, but there's some cleanup of older products, older data elements that is just taking some time, but it's a huge difference from what it used to be.
That is very insightful. Alan, did you have anything that you would like to add on that topic?
Well,
I'd like
think
to jump into.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I think change management is probably the next thing, because I think Alex has a couple of nuggets that we can talk about as related to that. But Bonnie, you've really sort of harped on the importance of change management along with for a successful Salesforce project, right?
Yeah, I mean, change management is really make it or break it, right? So the way I look at it is it's really got to be a two-pronged approach, right? Leadership has to be completely bought into this. There's no putting your toe in the water. Like you are, this is how we're going to be running our business going forward. Like that message coming from leadership, along with the context of what we call WIFM here at Salesforce. So what's in it for me? So giving them the not only the leadership is totally bought in, this is what we're doing, but here's the why and how it's going to make your life better and why we're doing this as a company. So really having that message be consistent and clear. And I can tell you, users are resistant to change. We all know that, right? And if they see a crack in that armor, that leadership isn't quite bought in all the way, or we think we're just going to try this out, your lives are much more difficult. Like you have got to be 1000% committed and give them the context of what's in it for them. So
yeah, and BusPatrol executed all the way through the project. We got to adoption, right? And a zillion different reasons why things may not go as planned once you're live. Could be we missed a process, and that's why we typically have a hypercare process to catch anything that might have slipped through all that, no matter how good your testing was. We really need to pay attention because that has a direct relationship to the user's desire and ability to adopt the solution. And even if you get all that right, you're still dealing with people. And, as Bonnie said, people have some levels of resistance to change, some more than others. Alex ran into a really interesting situation with his installers of these camera systems on buses, and came up with a pretty innovative way to address it. Alex?
Yeah, so when we launched the MVP, we launched it in first we did it with our trainers, got the feedback there. Then we rolled it out to one of our programs that we were launching, got feedback there. But when we started launching it to the wider audience, we first said, Salesforce is the way we're going. We're not using the old tool ever again. Forget about it, to make that clear. And then we created a game of it. So basically we gave all of the technicians points per action that they took in the system. So every bus they installed was 10 points. Every servicing item was 1 point. And they had to work as teams too. They were organized in teams of 3. And so we tallied all the points every week and announced who had the top points for the week, creating a little bit of competition. all at the same time, we were seeing how they were using the tool, collecting data, seeing where we were able to capture data points and not capture data points. We made adjustments to the tool where we saw, like I mentioned, the bad data in, where we saw like the free text fields were causing problems. We were able to make changes on the go. And so it really was a great way to, one, motivate the technicians to do the work in the right system, forcing them to really learn the system, take the time to adopt it, and collect data on how to make it even better. And then at the end, we responded to them saying, hey, we got all of your feedback on this, the past month of using this. We're going to use that for our final sprint to customize and make it more easy to use for you. And they loved it. And as a result, adoption, there are no grumblings anymore of like, oh, I have to use Salesforce. Like, that's the tool we use and it works. And we're continuing to leverage it for more and more.
There's a couple of themes in there that I love. We're not going back, guys. Burn that bridge.
Mhm.
You're here, right? And there's no looking back. I think that's an important message from leadership. The gamification play and the data, and just as importantly, taking that feedback and pushing it back around, I thought was key, because they see that their feedback actually resulted in changes. So now there's a stronger sense of ownership. So Alex, if you had to net out your lessons learned around your successful go live, what would they be?
Yeah. Overall, I'd say is planning is everything. Doing as much planning up front will lead to a better outcome and allow you to adjust quickly. Engagement of the key stakeholders, bringing them in and letting them know that it's equally their decision as yours, right? Yeah, I might have the final say, but the users have to be the ones to tell me that's the one they're going to use, that's what they want to do and how they want to do it. Really plan out how you're going to roll this out, because it's a new tool, right? And not everybody has the same aptitude for picking up tools. So think about the training, think about how you want to do that. We created videos and PDFs and, on-site training, that's, and because that was the audience we're working with. You have to really know your audience or how you're going to design your training. Some other things is, really get on top of your reporting early. Salesforce is amazing with the amount of tools and data elements it can provide you, but you really know what you need. And so sometimes some work and custom development is needed to present the data in the way that you want to see it. I wanted to know how many hours it took to install a bus from start to finish, but then I said, well, but I want to know it by type of bus. Well, that, they had them, they just got to connect the dots, right? So if you set those expectations early and really think about what kind of reporting you're going to need and what your KPIs at the end of it, you could start building them right away. And by the end of the time when we were complete, we had dashboards showing us all the data we needed to which I use for regular reporting today. And at any moment I can ask Doug, hey, I need to know how many servicing appointments did we do yesterday? He hits a key and boom, it's there, right? So that's all because of the planning we did and the focus on what are the outcomes we're going to have to achieve at the end. As a result, by doing this and having those prioritization meetings, like I mentioned, you're really able to get what you want out of the product. And my one example was where we shifted not midway, but we knew for the last sprint, we really wanted to focus on inventory management because we had a problem we didn't realize we had, more than vendor management. And so we prioritized that. By doing that, it really helped us, in our year-end audit. And what used to be a process that would take, almost a month of just painstakingly going through inventory, we're now able to recon on a weekly basis for our whole fleet, right? And that's a game changer, right? And that's because of Salesforce. So, huge improvement. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you, Alex. I love this story. We did get a couple of questions that came in. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A below. Bonnie answered a few of them. One I'd like to focus on, if we can take just 2 minutes here, and then maybe we'll have time to answer a second. How important is it to have a formal change management process? So the formality of it, and how much time, energy does this take if it's done correctly? You have a panelist that wants to take a first stab at that, maybe Alan?
Yeah, let me start. Your change management program investment correlates pretty strongly to the level of complexity in your processes, the scale of your organization, and the geographic span, right? So a global deployment of Salesforce change management is so important because there are so many moving parts. With a smaller organization, you can still employ these concepts, but you don't have to have like a full-time change management person. I think leadership is also key. A leader who understands the concepts and the importance of change management can immediately set the tone. But if you have somebody who does sort of a set it and forget it kind of approach and just leaves the project manager to sort of drive this, and he's got, managers above him or, key stakeholders who have their own agendas, that's tough, right? So I think you need to assess your organization's level of complexity and then invest the kind of structure that maps to that. So if you've got, and I'll use a little bit of a pejorative here, but if you're herding ducks as far as the managers that are, participating in this project, well, you probably need strong change management. If you've got a good, strong, cohesive management team that is all on the same page with regards to the goals of the project and how to get it done, then you're probably going to need less. Alex, Bonnie?
I totally agree. You really have to know who your end user is going to be as well to define your change management. In my case, my users are field technicians, right? They don't sit behind a computer all day. They're working on their cell phone or a tablet out in the cold weather, right? So when we designed it and how we decided to roll it out, we had to really think about that. We couldn't just put a webinar out there because they don't have the time to go look at it. We literally sent our technicians who were trained, and we trained our trainers who trained them how to install, to go out in the field and say, okay, let's do it right now, right? Let's walk through it. And that was intentional. And after enough iterations using the tool, they ended up getting it. Right. So, but, if I was deploying this on an organization where everybody's sitting behind a screen, different story, right? You could create webinars and track who's watching them and who's not, take tests, it just depends.
Awesome. So we have 1 minute left. Maybe we can really quickly touch on one other question.
I can try to answer both the next two.
Perfect.
So as far as integrating into an accounting, we didn't integrate it directly into our accounting tools, but we do yet use NetSuite. We're able to move data back and forth between Salesforce and NetSuite using a tool called Boomi. So we were able to do that, and our accounting team is able to reconcile and manage the inventory and depreciation because of that. So yes, we can do that. And then as far as having the Bolt team on site, absolutely. Because if you're, they're the ones they're the painters, right? They got to see what they're painting. Right. So having them on site, putting a drill in their hand in some cases and saying this is what they do. When they went back to start developing it, they had that in their mind. Okay, hey, I got to work for a person who's using a cell phone to do this work, to do these inputs. Right. So I hope that answers both questions.
Thank you, Alex. And to add to the integration piece, there are a lot of tools out there on the market. You can find them on our Salesforce App Exchange. A lot of partners have created tools. And we also, of course, own MuleSoft, which is a fantastic integration tool as well to help scale your business. I want to thank everybody for their time today. If you have any additional questions, we can please feel free to reach out to myself or Bonnie or Alan and the team. We'll be sure to send you a follow-up email with our contact information. We hope this is really helpful. Thank you again.
Thanks, everybody.